right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us here today on the next episode of EnergySource Innovation Stream from the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. We're excited to have you all join in from all over the world. My name is Julia Piper, and I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. I'm also the Vice President of Policy at GoodLeap, a financial technology company focused on sustainability. And I'm the host of Political Climate, a podcast covering climate and clean energy policy here in the US, supported by the USC Schwarzenegger Institute and produced in partnership with Canary Media. I'm delighted to be joined today by Glenn Schatz, Chief Revenue Officer at BlocPower, who I will let introduce himself in more detail in just a moment. Among BlocPower's many activities is the Civilian Climate Corps, a New Deal-inspired program that connects people from low-income and high-risk areas with jobs and training placement opportunities in the clean energy industry. The Civilian Climate Corps, or CCC, already has several exciting partnerships, including one with New York City's Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. The energy transition will require a massive infrastructure transformation. And this Climate Corps helps bridge the skills gap in the workforce and provides underserved communities with economic opportunity as well. Before we jump into the conversation, I have just a few reminders for our audience. First, you can follow us on Twitter at AC Global Energy and use the hashtag AC Energy to follow along with this conversation, ask questions, and send other comments there. We're also on the record, currently live streaming on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Finally, I encourage you all to share and post about what you hear today. Those in the virtual audience can submit questions also through the Q&A function, specifically right here on Zoom. I will try to get to as many of those questions as I can. And if you're watching another platform like YouTube, unfortunately, we cannot take your questions, but hope you'll engage with us on social media and in other ways going forward. With that, I will give the floor to Glenn for his presentation.
Thanks for the intro, Julia. As Julia mentioned, I'm Glenn Schatz. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at BlocPower. I've been with BlocPower for about 1.5 years, although was fortunate enough to first work with BlocPower about 8 years ago when I was at the Department of Energy, and I was helping administer one of their early grants, and was very excited about what BlocPower was doing then, and followed BlocPower and Danelle and Keith's work closely in the intervening years. And when I had the opportunity to join recently, I jumped at that opportunity. BlocPower's mission is to make buildings smarter, greener, and healthier by reducing fossil fuel consumption in those buildings. As many folks know, buildings account for a relatively large percentage of greenhouse gas emissions, and especially in urban areas where a lot of BlocPower's customers are, that percentage is even higher. So BlocPower was founded in 2014 by Danelle Baird and Keith Kinch. It's a Black-owned clean tech company, and we've interacted with about 1,200 projects completed to date. We focus on a number of different things, including program management and service delivery. We have a bunch of proprietary software and data to help us do that service delivery more efficiently. We also have a financial product that allows folks to pay for energy efficiency and electrification upgrades over a long period of time, which helps the numbers work for, especially in areas where access to finance is very challenging. And then what I'll focus most of my time on today is our workforce development program, which we've dubbed the Civilian Climate Corps. One of the things that we do to make project delivery easier is we try to be the one-stop shop for property owners. And what we found when we were doing this in most of the markets we're in, access to skilled labor was a huge challenge and continues to be a barrier. And I'll get into that a little bit more later in the presentation. But so because of not having access to available labor, and especially trying to hire locally and in the markets we were in, we decided to take on some workforce development training. And so we did this for our for-profit company as just part of keeping the business running. We wanted to make sure we were hiring locally where possible, that we were giving people the skills they needed to be able to participate in our projects. And then in 2020, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice came to us, and they looked at some of the ARPA money that was out there and thought there might be an interesting way to deploy some of it to be able to accomplish multiple missions. Reducing crime was primary on their mind, but they were also trying to figure out whether there are other policy goals that they could achieve with that same pool of funding. So with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice in New York, BlocPower developed the Civilian Climate Corps, and we've really focused on trying to create a pathway to sustainable jobs from the communities who most need those jobs, as well as the communities who most need access to building improvements and electrification. So we've designed this program to achieve a number of different goals. A big part of it, because BlocPower is, we always have environmental justice in front of mind. And so part of this program is making sure we're actively recruiting in neighborhoods that are deemed low status or of need. And so working with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, we actually found the 3 most dangerous neighborhoods in New York: Brownsville, Brooklyn, Mott Haven in South Bronx, and South Jamaica, Queens, and recruited initially in the program exclusively from those neighborhoods. And we've expanded our recruiting a little bit to also include residents of New York City public housing and other low-income individuals, but still targeted very much on areas in need. We tried to provide all the services that were possible to make sure people could participate. And so a lot of our program consists of wraparound services, life skills, job skills. We pay from day one, $20 an hour. So it's very important that people don't have to stop whatever they're doing to participate in the program. They come to the program and they are getting a salary right away. And we're also trying to ensure that the program helps people get the skills necessary to continue to participate in the green economy, which we all know is going to be a rapidly growing economy, economic sector in the future. And as I mentioned, it's really important for us to provide those wraparound services, and I'll get into more detail on what that is in a couple slides. So as part of the technical training, we do provide basic job skills and life skills training. So everyone gets their OSHA certification. What we discovered early on in the program is that a lot of our participants didn't have bank accounts, or they didn't have ways to do direct deposit. So as part of the initial couple of weeks, we do a lot of things around job preparation, making sure people who may not have had formal economy jobs before have access to all of the things that they need to actually participate in the economy. We do things like training people to be on regular workplaces, the type of expectations that employers have, because part of the program is actually placing people on real job sites. So there's not classroom, there's a lot of practical work involved. And so we need to ensure that folks know what to do when they get to a job site. And then as people advance through the program, we do specialization. The primary industries that we serve are in the energy environment space. So we do HVAC training, we do energy auditing training, we've done solar installation training, EV charging station training, and then other specific skills and requests by some of the employers who we partner with in the program. The other thing that we've started to train people to do more recently is more of the back office training to be able to support the field techs. So while most of the program participants are involved in the skilled tech parts of the program, we've expanded it to include a little bit more office work as well, especially around doing things like broadband and tech support for these types of programs. And then the most important part of the program, and what we spend the most time with, is on that on-site training. So we get people on real job sites doing real work. And we find that the earlier that we get people on job sites, the earlier we can figure out what people are ready to do and what they're not. And so, it's important. Some of the weatherization work can be very challenging and physical. And some people just don't want to be able to, they don't want to do those sort of jobs or can't do it all day long. And so it's really important before they get a lot of classroom training on some of these jobs that they understand what they're getting themselves into. And if it's not the right fit, we try to find something that's better for how they want to work. And then one of the most essential parts to keeping program participants involved in the program throughout the whole program period is wraparound services. Now, these wraparound services are not cheap. They make up about a third of our budget, but they're very, very important, both for recruiting folks as well as retaining them in the program. And so our program runs anywhere between 3 and 6 months, and having a personal social worker and case management person who knows you, knows your problems and your needs and the things that you need to be able to stay part of the workforce. It's really important to have that relationship. And we actually work with about 15 different case management providers in New York City. And it's really critical. They also provide a lot of the recruitment because they have these deep relationships in the neighborhoods that we're trying to recruit from. And so they're a very, very important part of this. And this is one part that for future programs, I just want to kind of stomp my foot on it. This can't be neglected. This is very, very important, especially as you're trying to recruit from communities that don't necessarily always get recruited by workforce development programs. So I want to talk about a couple case studies because I think that putting a face on the program is important. So we don't just work with returning citizens. We do try to recruit people who are maybe adjacent to crime in the neighborhoods they're in, or adjacent to violence, but not necessarily directly committing that violence. There's a lot of people who are looking for paths out of bad situations, and so we try to recruit those folks first. But we're also not against bringing people in that do have criminal backgrounds, and so we don't do we don't discriminate against folks who have these backgrounds. And so we've had a lot of success with returning citizens who are really interested in trying to gain skills but don't know where to start. And so and the thing that we've also found is that most of our participants are 18 to 30. That's the age range that we recruit from. But returning citizens that are a little bit older are a good fit because they can add a little bit of maturity. They have other experience besides the jobs, and they can provide insight into what the wrong paths might be and the different benefits that being in these programs and staying involved in the programs provide. So we find that to be very important. And then the other thing that we've found as part of this program is that in a lot of cases, we are the first organization that are giving some of these folks a chance. And in fact, one of the someone who's a BlocPower employee now that comes from one of these neighborhoods spoke. I was at an offsite with him, and he was saying, he's smart, very, very smart. Went to college, but growing up in a neighborhood like in the South Bronx, there aren't a lot of people telling you that you can do things. And so even though he knew he had the ability to do a lot of things, he didn't feel like he could do it because there wasn't this sort of, it just didn't feel like it was a job that was something that he could aspire to. And now he's a supervisor. He manages lots and lots of folks. And he still has to grapple with imposter syndrome, that comes up. But I think in a lot of cases, giving folks a chance, getting them on job sites right away and out of the classroom is really helpful for making people understand or helping people understand, what paths are available to them. And then some quick stats, just as we wrap up. We've put about 1,200 people through the program so far. The first year program was relatively large. It was about a $30 million budget. It cost about $25,000 a participant. But we've managed to do over 200 job placements. We've done 40 work sites. We have some really, really cool success stories, like doing solar on Rikers Island. We've also been able to dispatch our crews to help after large storms, to help with flooding in basements and these sorts of things, to help small business owners do repairs or help them take down some of the outdoor dining that they put up temporarily during COVID. The other thing that I'm very proud of is the number of women that we put through this program is a much, much higher percentage than the normal construction trades. So over a quarter of our participants are women, and actually in the first couple of groups, it was almost half. The women that were involved were very, very interested in getting additional skills and training. One of the things that we also tried to provide early on in the program was emergency childcare. And so having childcare be part of the program helped open up the program to a number of folks. We don't provide full-time childcare because that obviously is very expensive, but we wanted to make sure people had the ability to stay with the program and not have lots of off ramps for different types of life reasons. And the other thing that I'm very proud of is about 80% of the folks were unemployed prior to this program. And so, we weren't taking people and just upskilling them. We were taking people who truly didn't have jobs. And if they did, a lot of them weren't in the formal economy. They, may have done odd jobs here and there, or on-demand service economy jobs, but nothing like this. And so the program has also been a success in the eyes of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. Crime has homicides have gone down in the neighborhoods that we've targeted. Gun violence has gone down in the neighborhoods we've targeted, and I think it's complicated, and that reduction is can't necessarily all be attributed to this program, but crime in other parts of the city has gone up, and so we'd like to take a little bit of credit for that. And the program has actually been extended for 2 additional years and expanded to try to recruit up to about 1,500 people per year over the next 2 years. So looking forward to the questions, but this is a very large program. It's not necessarily something that all cities have budgets for, but we think that a lot of the lessons learned in this program can be applied at different scale points. And so we talk to cities all over the country about this type of programs, and making sure that as you think about different policy goals, like reducing crime, like reducing unemployment, like ensuring that people are trained in 21st century skills, and also things like reducing CO2 emissions. We think that the more of those that can be combined into a single program, the more weight and money can be put into that program to achieve all of these goals instead of having it in a bunch of different stovepipes. So with that, I will I'll pause for questions from Julia and from the rest of the audience.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Glenn. Wow. What's so incredible to me about this program is that you're not just doing literal job training, you are wrapping it around with, as you mentioned, everything from social worker support to daycare, potentially, these things that actually make things stickable and work for people's lives. One question on that before I go on, and reminder to our audience to please submit your questions. Were there any surprises in that process? Was that difficult to do in structuring a more comprehensive program? Or was that the intent from the beginning? Or did you have to learn as you went, oh no, we cannot just throw up a job training, seminar and expect that to work for the community? How did that evolve?
So there were lots of surprises at the beginning. We actually had very little notice. So we were negotiating this program with the city for a couple months, and most programs you negotiate 6 to 12 months in advance, and then you have a window to ramp up. We basically had to ramp up within a month of being awarded the contract because of some of the strings attached to the ARPA money and how quickly it needed to be spent. And so some of the stuff that happened at the beginning, in retrospect, shouldn't have been a surprise. But it just was, because we were ramping up so quickly. So things like not being able to do direct deposit. Our HR software that we use and our PEO that helps administer a lot of our HR work couldn't be used for this program. So we had to basically, luckily, Danelle had a relationship with the CEO of Zenefits, and they were able to kind of pull some strings internally to help us onboard into that program relatively quickly. And then, we were able to get around a couple policy restrictions there as well to make sure that we can have folks that may not have had all the necessary paperwork on day one into the system. And then we worked with their case managers to get the paperwork over the course of the first few weeks of the program. The biggest challenges we had were really around paying people initially. And then also when you're asking people to leave, even if it's an informal economy job, or maybe they were helping deliver some things or helping with childcare, they were getting real income from that. And so asking them to come into a program, we wanted to make sure we could pay them, right away. And so the fact that we couldn't necessarily get direct deposit into the bank account right away was a challenge. And we had other things that we need to do, like make sure that they had Metro cards to be able to get to the classroom training and these sorts of things, because we wanted to make sure that none of these barriers that most of us wouldn't ever run into just because we've had jobs, we know what's expected. we don't want people to attrite from the program prior to it even starting because of some things that maybe we neglected to provide. And so we try to be very flexible in the early days of the program. And then one of the other things too that we learned was that a lot of the case management providers that we work with were relatively small. They're very good at what they do in terms of engaging with the actual program participants, but their back office support and some of the paperwork and documentation, they're used to dealing directly with the city, and that model doesn't necessarily scale. And so we've had to redo a lot of the processes around documentation and paying vendors and making sure that everything is accounted for in a way that we can report correctly. And so that was another big, again, not necessarily a surprise. We should have expected it, but it was a challenge for us early on.
So another question, which may relate to something that was in the Q&A earlier, is sort of like the longevity of these programs. So you mentioned one of the workers went on to work at BlocPower. Can you describe what kinds of jobs people go into after the program? What kinds of companies? How does that work, if I'm describing it correctly?
Yeah, so where possible, we try not to place people at BlocPower because we want to make sure this is a benefit to other programs. We have some leeway to bring on a few folks, especially if they're going to be involved in supervising the program itself. And so we've probably brought on between 5 and 10 folks into BlocPower to help administer the program. One of the nice things about this is that, so we are involved in a lot of projects throughout the city. We work with a lot of contractors and a lot of different types of employers. And when we first brought this idea to them, they were a little bit skeptical. Having people who don't have a lot of job training onto a job site carry some risk for them. A lot of them said, well, our insurance can't cover this. And so we try to take all of that administrative work away from the employers. So when we put someone on a job site, they're a BlocPower employee. They are, their insurance, their benefits are all being paid for through the program. And they're really just detailed to this job site where the person, really is just showing them how to do the work. We actually even send supervisors to the job sites if there are enough participants there to make sure that some of the things that can come up on a job site have someone to address it right away on site. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible for employers. And the way that I try to describe this program to folks who are more used to traditional white collar jobs is that most of us have some sort of time to productivity in our jobs, no matter what they are. Even if you're very skilled at whatever you do, it takes you 3 to 6 months to understand how to do that job at your company. And in the white collar workforce, that's just accounted for in part of the cost of doing business, part of HR process. It's just part of the normal churn of business. Whereas in a lot of these blue collar jobs and skilled trades, they don't really like to think of this time for activity. They want someone on a job site who can do the job right away. And so they would prefer to hire folks who have come up through, traditional, trades programs, who already have, whatever the, whether it's a union card or some sort of certification from the city. That way they can know when they get to a job site from day one, they're able to be productive. What we've done is we've tried to take this concept of time to productivity, and we're subsidizing that for the employer. So we're paying these employees $20 an hour for 3 to 6 months on a job site where, they may not be the best at doing whatever it is that the employer wants them to do on day one. And there may be some additional overhead associated with having that person on a job site. But at the end of that time period, they will have, ideally after a couple of months, someone who is more skilled, can do work on the job site, who's still being paid by us for a couple more months as they are able to integrate themselves into these new employers. And that makes it much easier for the employers to hire them at the end of the program.
Got it. Thank you for that. So going to some audience questions here, and maybe I can merge these two. One question is about what community stakeholders did you find worked to get the word out? Communities, centers, churches, and then a related question is, could you please develop your approach to identify the needs specific to each community? So maybe those kind of go together. How did you engage with other stakeholders, and how did you make sure that what you were working on actually worked for the community?
So we're lucky at BlocPower that the organization has very deep community roots. The other thing that's pretty unique about BlocPower compared to any other company that I've been involved with is that this whole concept of organizing is core to what BlocPower does. So Danelle and Keith both come out of the political world. Community organizing is a formal thing. They've both been trained in community organizing and took a lot of those principles that they learned. And one of the things that every BlocPower employee has to go through after you start is organizing training. We do it with Metro IAF in New York City, but IAF is kind of known throughout the country in different places for being able to do grassroots organizing and trying to understand the difference between organizing and service delivery and mobilization, which is there's some nuance there, but it's very key in how we do this. And a lot of organizing is listening and not telling people what you think they need, but listening to what they actually need and trying to fit, if it's possible, what you're doing into those needs. So we've already been doing that in the neighborhoods around where we were asked to do this program. We do have deep relationships with faith-based communities in all the markets we're in. That's usually our number one entry point into a market, is going through the faith-based communities in those markets, because they are in a lot of places still the anchor institutions of the markets. Schools, especially community colleges, are another place that we go to. And then after that, the case management vendors tend to have very, very good relationships as well. And so we work with them on recruiting. And so, there's no shortcut to any of this. In new markets, developing these relationships is challenging and takes time. We do have, some ways that we've thought about speeding that process up by making sure that the way that we recruit in new markets is very thoughtful. But yeah, and then as we go through the program, a lot of it's word of mouth. It's from program participants telling people that they know about it, telling their friends, neighbors. Again, in New York, it's a little bit different because it's so dense that we're only focusing on 3 neighborhoods mostly, and we're able to get hundreds of participants out of those 3 neighborhoods. So in a rural area, it would probably be very different. But it's the same principles would apply. It's listening to people, developing deep relationships with the right institutions, and then going through those institutions to make sure you're getting the right folks in the program.
We just have a couple minutes left, so we'll try and do these, quickly if possible. One question is about opportunities for youth ages 14 to 24. Have you looked specifically at programs that would target younger workers?
We do have a small youth cohort. It's a separate funding stream than this main program, but I think we've done about 50 to 100 people in that age range. With the youth, it's actually much more focused on digital skills. So we're doing stuff more around programming, other like auditing, like the type of things that they're more interested in. We're not putting a ton of younger folks directly on construction sites. The youth are doing some of the auditing programs and maybe some of like the less physically intense programs. It's just so they have some exposure to these jobs. But yeah, we're trying to keep the youth and the adult programs somewhat separate.
Got it. And finally, because it's, very newsy right now, we've just seen the Senate pass the Inflation Reduction Act. We've seen Congress put together, applause, this large, roughly $370 billion spending package for climate and clean energy programs. Is there anything in there that would support these types of initiatives? And then, to wrap us up, take a broader look. Is there anything you want to see Congress do more going forward to help make programs like the one in New York replicable in other parts of the country?
So there are some specific programs around workforce development. They're relatively small compared to the whole program. There still, though, there's a lot of ARPA dollars that still need to be spent. So, as we talk to policymakers, one of the things that we would like to point out is that in almost every market we're in, the biggest barrier is finding skilled labor to do these types of projects. And as you all know, the labor market is super, super tight right now. It's even more tight in skilled trades and construction. And so, we don't think that at the end of the day, that money is going to be the thing that solves it. It's going to be a combination of money and good policy. And so trying to figure out how to best utilize the ARPA dollars that are already out there and to put as much of that possible into training and reskilling to be able to then take advantage of the additional money that's going to be coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act, I think is really important. And it's really important for cities and municipalities to get ahead of that. And so if they're just waiting for that money to come out, it's going to take a year or two to actually get the folks that are able to do the work trained and ready. And so, I would encourage every political leader, every local leader now to start thinking about what you can be doing now to make sure that your town, city, state has the skills necessary to be able to do the work that's going to be funded by the bill.
Much more we could talk about, Glenn, but we'll have to leave it there as our time is starting to run out. Thank you so much for this detailed explanation and everything you're doing at BlocPower. It's really fantastic work. So thank you also to everyone who tuned in. And I'd also like to thank a few other folks who helped put this event together, including Amaya Hadap, Jesus Fernandez, and Eamon Coughlin. We'll definitely be keeping up with BlocPower's work going forward. And if you'd like to rewatch this event, it's a cache replay will be available on the Atlantic Council Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter accounts. We encourage you also to share this with friends and colleagues who want to know more about BlocPower and workforce development programs in the clean energy sector. That is all for now. I'm Julia Piper. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and until next time.